Namaste, I'm Pleasant Home, and today on The Detail, Indians are now the third largest ethnic group in the country. So what brings them here? And why is the Indian government now warning people, nurses in particular, against making the move?
Well, around 20 Indian nurses say they are jobless after arriving in New Zealand, expecting to work on accredited employer work visas.
Hundreds of international nurses attracted to New Zealand by recruitment agencies are without work and tens of thousands of dollars out of pocket.
Indians have been coming to New Zealand for 100 years, and the Indian community has been dealing with migrant exploitation for the last quarter of a century or more. This is a report I filed for RNZ last year. 5 workers on accredited employer work visas from Punjab, India, have found themselves in limbo upon arriving in New Zealand to work in Auckland. The workers were employed at a restaurant in Auckland, but their situation took a turn for the worse when their employer allegedly stopped paying them at the end of December. They also claim the owner demanded extortion payments and forced them to work extended hours. But things have got so bad that earlier this year, the Indian government warned Indian nationals not to come to New Zealand unless they have a genuine job offer. She's saying, I've spent $24,000 on getting the visa, and with my living expenses here, it totals to about $15,000 more. In September, the Indian High Commission issued a statement advising Indian nurses not to come to New Zealand unless they had a genuine job offer. This was in response to reports that a number of Indian nurses already here were struggling to find jobs despite successfully completing the competency assessment program and registering with the New Zealand Nursing Council. Health authorities were not hiring because of budget cuts, there were changes to the qualification system, and they were getting rejected for being on visitor visas. The Commission also warned migrants against paying agents who promised guaranteed jobs, advising people to contact its office to get these kind of offers checked.
Exploitation has been happening. It's not something new. It's been happening for 25 years.
When our borders reopened after COVID-19, the accredited employer work visa was reintroduced to make it easier for businesses to hire migrant workers. But almost immediately, immigration expert raised concerns, warning that insufficient checks on accredited employers were leading to scams and widespread mistreatment of migrants.
3 days we don't have nothing to eat, only just drinking water.
No food.
No food, nothing.
No food, sir. Only drinking water.
Drinking water.
How would you feel if you were asked to pack all your bags and leave for India next month? Devastated, right? Well, that nightmare is 29-year-old migrant's reality today. He came to New Zealand in November 2022. The job he was promised turned out to be a lie. He was asked to pay $30,000 for the visa by his agent cum employer, believing that it was his ticket to success. His family had managed to raise 21,000 New Zealand dollars by selling their home.
Well, you guys took $20,000 from us to get a job. Well, you promised us you could give a better life here. There's no better life here.
A major criminal investigation is underway tonight after dozens of hungry migrants were discovered crowded inside a squalid 3-bedroom home in South Auckland.
It's alleged the men paid thousands of dollars for employment agreements with local recruitment contractors, but since arriving they've received no work or pay.
Last night, the men called police after their food ran out and they were forced to turn to begging.
Immigration New Zealand officials are investigating the exploitation of Indian and Bangladeshi migrants after 144 were found living in cramped and unsanitary conditions across 10 houses in Auckland.
3 months we have been suffering here. We didn't send even $1 also to my family and my children. How can they eat?
Sudesh Junjunwala, CEO of Sujima Hotels and Hint Management Group, is very vocal about the problem after experiencing the dark side of immigration.
You know, to me, that's causing human misery. It's like you are taking part in slavery, and you know, anyone who sees that and keeps quiet, I think that you are equally complicit. Like, I remember when I moved here, I think it was like 3 or 4 years later, once we had 2 hotels, I got a call from someone saying, hey, you know, if you give us this job letter, you know, like you've got so many people working for you, it should be easy for you to give a job letter. And in return, I'll give you $10,000 per letter. And I was like, you know, I was so upset at that this person would even think of calling me up for something like that.
Sudesh owns 8 hotels in the country, and he's offering a second chance to exploited migrants by giving them employment.
Migrants are always looking to improve their livelihood. I mean, like, my grandfather moved out of India in 1917, and that was exactly the same reason, that he wanted to improve his future of his family and next generation. So when people move, they see what the opportunities are, and once they are here, they will work hard.
He moved to New Zealand in the early 2000s from Hong Kong.
I mean, you're not moving to a new country just so that you can slack and somebody gives you food and money. I moved here because we had started investing in New Zealand in 1991, and that was in industrial and commercial properties. And by 2000, it became like the largest part of our portfolio in terms of, like, you have businesses and offices in Hong Kong, Singapore, and everywhere. But New Zealand suddenly became the largest part of our assets and portfolio. So it was decided that a family member should move down here.
Why New Zealand, though? What attracted you to New Zealand?
Our family has always looked for a safe place to invest in terms of geopolitical risks, and some place which has good rule of law. So, when you come down from Hong Kong, so there's Australia, there's New Zealand, I would say, which are the two main countries which attract a lot of investments from people looking for safe investment places. So we chose New Zealand.
What inspired you to give these individuals a second chance?
I got a call from a friend of mine a company called Working In, and he said, Sudesh, I've got 3 chefs who are under that exploitation visa.
The Migrant Exploitation Protection Visa is a relatively new development which gives open work rights to migrants who get caught in these types of situations.
And would you be able to help them? So, my HR team, my people and culture team worked very closely with them and the immigration department and made sure that all 3 of them got a job with us. I wish I could hire a few more, but, I don't have jobs for everyone. But it made a very small difference in their life in terms of, very small difference in the number of people who are exploited.
In the kitchen of Sujima's Auckland hotel, Chef Sujit Gaha is gearing up for the lunch rush. Sujit is one of the migrants who got saved by Sujima after experiencing exploitation in his previous job.
I work per week 35 hours, but I work more than per week, 80 to 90 hours per week, no day off. I work 3-4 months.
Sujit sought help from Auckland's Nepali community and found his way out. And luckily for him, Sujima was hiring.
I mean, just 3, I was able to save only 3 of them, but there's so many other people out there who have exploited so badly.
What steps do you think the businesses in New Zealand should take to make sure that they have a really fair and safe working environment for these migrant workers? Because they will keep coming.
Oh, look, unfortunate part is that, in the small villages in India, and not just India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, whole of South Asia, and then now Middle East, there are a lot of people who are looking to migrate to migrate out of those countries. So, I mean, there has to be a better checks and balances on our side here. And I've been blamed to say, hey, you've gotten in here and now we are trying to close the door. That's not true. I'm just saying that if you bring in the right people, you bring in people who are needed here, and then you make sure that they're looked after, that, they're being paid their due salaries, and they're all the holiday pays and everything is, they're not being exploited. And that will lead to a better, experience for all around.
Well, what can the government do, in your opinion?
I think certainly not chopping and changing the rules all the time. And then maybe getting the Indian High Commission involved.
Do you think people get away with migrant exploitation here?
Yeah, because, when some of the narrative I get is like, oh, it's the agents who are to blame. No, the blame starts the day an employer here applies for a visa saying, hey, I need 3 workers. that's where the starting point happens. It's not the agents, it's not the Indian side. They say there's corruption happening in India side, but it's the guys here who are, if they're not applying for those visas, it stops there. Government needs to realize, our immigration needs to realize that they need to put safeguards in place, and it can't just be, and that means you have to have a more consistent policy. You can't keep chopping and changing rules. The biggest thing that we did, which was to have those accredited work visas, which came into place 2.5 years ago. And I looked at that and I knew it's just going to cause so much human misery, because there'll be people who will be profiteering out of it. It's they'll be for each worker they were bringing in, they were getting $40,000 to $50,000 per person. And people were getting 20 workers in. And Immigration Department was just stamping that in, saying, yep, bring them in.
The accredited employer work visa introduced in 2022 by the Labour government has helped bring thousands of migrants to New Zealand. However, it also saw many migrants getting exploited, prompting eventual government intervention.
When this policy was announced, lots of immigration advisors tried to warn the government, saying that what you are planning to do was done in Canada. You are going to recreate exactly the same challenges as there were in Canada.
Malkiyat Singh has been working as a licensed immigration advisor since 2014.
In Canada, it was very popular that if you had to go to Canada, you would pay up to 20 to 40,000 Canadian dollars, and that would let you on a pathway to get a work visa, and that would eventually could result into residence. So when immigration announced that we are going to introduce this policy, it was so clear to immigration advisors that exactly the same problems could happen in New Zealand. But again, government and policies, they are developed, in my opinion, in a kind of isolation, where they don't engage with industry professionals well enough to get some feedback and say, hey, this is what we are proposing. What do we need to be mindful of? If they had done that kind of consultation before launching this policy, maybe we could have had different outcomes.
Are you saying that the accredited employer work visa scheme, which was introduced a few years ago, was one of the reasons why we've seen a rise in migrant exploitation cases in New Zealand?
Indirectly, yes, because it allowed people the ability to do so. However, government holds the view that if somebody breaks the law, it's not our fault. We are here to make laws simple enough for employers and for migrants to get the genuine outcomes. If somebody is playing the system, it's not our fault. So if we hold that into account, we cannot blame the government or the policy, because laws are there with the right intentions. But if we think about how much effort we have put into safeguarding and making sure that the outcomes we intend are the outcomes we will get, then I think industry feedback is valuable, which was missed.
So Indian community is the third largest ethnic community here in New Zealand. But the community has been dealing with migrant exploitation for such a long time. Why do you think it's been happening again and again and again in New Zealand?
I would attribute this factor to the determination of migrants to achieve their outcomes. Because that determination to settle in New Zealand is so strong, they would admit or agree or comply with exploitative arrangements, because the stakes seems so high, especially if somebody comes here and if they have to go back, there is a stigma which they have to face. Oh, your son couldn't succeed there, he's a failure. So people think, I don't want to be labeled as a failure who could not succeed. I would never go back. So these kind of social stigmas lead them to take actions which initially they might agree to, But later it becomes clear to them that they cannot continue in the situation, and thus they come out and they report exploitation.
Do you think that migrants are willing to be exploited so that they can stay in New Zealand?
I would say we need to evaluate why New Zealand is a great place to be. New Zealand is a country built by migrants. Original settlers were also migrants. They were not born here. All people had that desire of exploration, of progress, of making things better for their lives and their families. This is the same feeling which drives migrants to get exploited, because they have left their homes and lands with a hope for a better future for their kids, for their families. This is the reason they say yes to being exploited. But it doesn't have to be that way. We can also create opportunities for them where they will also say yes for training, education, and commitment. We can create pathways of residence where they give clear indication to migrants that these are the skills we need, and here is a simple pathway to follow. At the moment, the pathways are too hard.
Malkiyat points out that there is a unique opportunity for the government to solve this problem.
In my opinion, if we truly were to solve this problem, we need to think about our immigration policies in a more holistic manner. For example, if we have shortage of certain occupations, if you evaluate our education policy and immigration policy, there is a clear disconnect. And we have a clear opportunity with Honorable Erica Stanford leading both of these ministries. There is an opportunity to come up with a solution for this. For example, there are many occupations in which if a migrant wants to study, there are no pathways to study. Those qualifications are only available to people who are in employment. For example, if you want to do an apprenticeship program, you need to be on a work visa. Only then you can do an apprenticeship program. There is no qualification which you could study and get those skills. We need to think about creating pathways for migrants who are interested to settle in our country and create a clear education pathway which will lead them into employment through apprenticeship programs. So more international people should be allowed to these pathways to get those skills which we lack and which we need in the country. At the moment, people are willing to go into those occupations which will lead them for residence, but there is no pathway for them.
If you don't have a genuine job offer, the Indian government just says you don't go to New Zealand. What do you think about that advisory?
I think it's a very good advice, but it will also be never followed. So I think governments also need to educate people on the limitations of visa policies, how work visas do not lead to residence. Simply by saying that if the job is not real, don't go, will not help. You need to educate people of what is the end goal. Are you planning to settle there? It is not going to happen because this is the limitation of the policies. It does not yield into settlement there, and New Zealand has no option where you can have a child in the country and then you can file an application. I'm amazed so many people have asked me, what if we give birth to a child? Would it help us to become permanent? Would our child get New Zealand citizenship by birth? Because they have heard stories from other countries. They come here thinking they will do something by hook or crook, they will never go back, and that's what leads to exploitation.
Do you think there's more the Indian government can do?
Yeah, absolutely. Indian government should also try to create public releases, educating people on how New Zealand immigration system works, that if you are being promised a job does not mean you can live there permanently. These are the limitations. This is how the system is structured. Be very sure that you're only going there for temporary purpose. If you're going with this intention that once you'll go there, you'll find some pathway, you will be disappointed.
Back in the hotel, Sujit has some advice to other migrants who want to come and work in New Zealand.
If you want to come to New Zealand, you want to first learn about the New Zealand, first the rules and regulations.
That's it for today. The Detail is a newsroom production supported by RNZ and New Zealand On Air. Thank you to Sudesh Chunjunwala, Sujit Kaha and Malkiyat Singh. This episode was engineered by Jeremy Veal and produced by Alexia Russell and Davina Simmer. I am Blessing Tom on loan from RNZ Asia. Nandi Namaskaram.